Welcome to the 60-second video in this series, Foundations of Communist Organizing. And also, this happens to be the last video in this series. And there may be a particularly long period of time between this and any further uploads. I will be preparing all the different PowerPoint series in terms of all these different series. Still, let's move forward. We've got the 1989 piece by the ICP, Parties, Theses, and Classical Evaluations on Imperialist Wars. And I've subtitled this, Preparing for Imperialist Wars Through Revolutionary Defeatism and Solidarity, Seizing Political Power. And real quick to preface, I actually struggled with this piece mildly when I first read it because there are some things that they were talking about other organizations were doing and saying, and critiquing those and making fun of them. And I actually thought that they were calling for these things themselves and was deeply, deeply confused. In my go over for breaking this down and turning it into the summary, I, for the most part, fixed it up as best as I could, because I essentially went through it, but there might be some degree of weirdness in this. Let me know if you see anything, but I think I got everything out and essentially reversed position on some of the things that I said that it was calling for. So, because there are no longer any external enemies of the capitalist order from a reactionary feudal character, the only class enemy of the proletariat at this point is their national bourgeoisie and the international bourgeoisie. As such, there's no basis for any alignment with either at any point within the international class struggle. Thus, all communists and communist parties must take up a position of strict revolutionary defeatism, with immediate struggle of the proletariat of all countries against all governments, to transform the now continuous and unceasing imperialist war into a civil war, and seize political power, along with continuing that civil war against any state where capital still holds power, even if the proletariat has won. Under any conditions, communists side with the proletariat, whether the war is a quote-unquote defensive or offensive one, wherein the proletariat spread the revolution by the butt of a rifle in order to support the national communists to do their own revolution. Fundamentally, at all times, internationalism is a key aspect with the rejection of all sectarianism. Once the world market has been established and finance capital saturated all markets, resulting in capitalism reaching the imperialist phase, war becomes an economic necessity for the competing bloc of imperialist powers to engage in on behalf of their national bourgeoisie's interests of expanding their penetration into the world market. Therefore, anyone seeking an end to war must seek the violent overthrow of the capitalist system, which subsists off of blood and death and will die without either. Thus, communists do not take up a stance that war is something to be avoided at all costs, even under the basis of the proletariat backing any given bourgeois state. Nor can imperialist wars be stopped with worker strikes carried out by the proletariat. Rather, the whole edifice of capital must be brought down. This is the only method by which war can be stopped, and therefore any sort of bargaining with the bourgeoisie is bound not only for failure, but also harming one's ability to take the actions necessary to actually bring about the material and social conditions by which war can be ended. These material and social conditions require a social revolution which is carried out by the proletariat utilizing an organization which can strike at the heart of the capitalist system, seizing political social power in a material and direct sense, the dictatorship. This organization is a class party which adheres to and is developed around the correct program, doctrine, tactics, organizational structure, operations, and so on. Through experience and theoretical consistency, we understand that the political class party should never, with an imperialist conflict, do any of the following. 1. Deny revolution and instead support any reformist stance. 2. Negate class struggle to any degree. 3. Cede social chauvinism and support any kind of patriotism. 4. Reject internationalism. Or 5. Ignore, reduce, or cease illegal struggle. Conversely, the party must maintain an absolutely revolutionary stance based on class struggle, revolutionary defeatism, absolute internationalism, non-sectarianism, and build its ability to engage in legal struggle during the nation's condition of weakness, as it engages in external struggle. This is the only way to defeat opportunism, which is beaten back when the party and proletariat engages in class struggle in a direct and strong way, which is best guided by the party. The opportunists will always be the first to leap in the defense of the bourgeoisie, and the first that needs to be defeated by the correct stance and by the proletariat taking up that stance. Given all of this, the party anticipates, prepares for, and hopes for an economic crisis under capitalism, as these crises, inevitable as they are, drive the proletariat to fight for their immediate economic interests, to organize to fight for those interests. This allows for the quantitative growth of the party as members of the proletariat and petty bourgeoisie, who are being converted into proletarians, by the way, during such a downturn. And many of the proletarians who are former petty bourgeois are drawn into communism. In addition, the party anticipates and prepares for the inevitable imperialist wars, and crisis itself having phases of preparation, outbreak, development, and immediate post-war. The party uses its preparation to take advantage of each phase of imperialist war in order to give itself stronger ground and attempt to overthrow capitalism. However, it must be known that in order to take advantage of the outbreak period, the party must already be in existence and be taking the correct stance learned from historical experience, revolutionary defeatism. Despite the party being prepared for imperialist war and recognizing it as a potential point of attack against the bourgeois state, the party does not hope for and seek out imperialist war, as a capitalist system is in fact revivified by the advent of imperialist war. It goes to war in order to bring fresh life to itself through murder and destruction. If the party fails to take advantage and stop the war before it reaches maturation, then our task becomes more difficult in the victorious imperialist countries manyfold, and more difficult in the losing countries in many wars, since war is helpful and necessary for the capitalist system for both the victor and the vanquished. Simply put, the longer a war develops, the worse our prospects for taking advantage of it are. Still, revolutionary defeatism is to be maintained regardless of it if it can determine we can achieve victory or not, as breaking with it will irrevocably weaken the party's theoretical basis and only attract chauvinists, while alienating the international proletariat. At the same time, it can also provide the decisive push towards revolution, as it is the most blatant emblem of the crises inherent in capital, and roughly shakes the system of production internationally. During an imperialist war, the party will function within the limitations of force between the proletariat and bourgeoisie, seeking to maintain defeatism within the army legally and illegally, while also taking advantage of instability between nations after the imperialist war, seeking to drive for proletarian revolution in the vanquished nation. There are also conditions wherein a delay of the outbreak of war is favorable, when we identify its development and can reorient the party to take advantage of the outbreak of an imperialist war, but need time to prepare. When the delay is favorable, the party seeks to create one, but does not subordinate itself to humanitarian and collaborationist pacifist movements. Next, the text talks about activity mainly in the West, saying that the rebirth of class movements will start with classist unions, and there will need to be notable developments of party influence on the class and economic organizations. The party will need to aim at getting ideologies and programs which are based on democratic action and use of bourgeois institutions out of these organizations, as they destroy the capacity of them to reach militant activity. Then there's an entire weird and stupid section where they talk about rejecting all intermediatism, which they define as saying an aim at an intermediate goal that would make carrying out revolutionary action more easy in the future. I would liken this to being soldiers trying to cross a bridge filled with enemy emplacements, traps, barbed wire, and so on, and the commander then saying that their soldiers should just run as fast as they can straight through it without capturing any bulkheads, taking cover, engaging in necessary tactical retreats, going around obstacles, and so on. I understand the source. There's morons who would claim that, for instance, we should vote for Democrats on grounds that organizing is easier. But these are unquestionably distinct. The actions taken by those soldiers attempting to cross a bridge properly are done with their feet firmly on the ground and with final goal in mind. And as Luxemburg said, quote, "The basic question of the socialist movement has always been how to bring its immediate practical activity in agreement with its ultimate goal. The politics based on fear of internal opportunism, tossing aside the final goal in favor of the immediate goal, leading one to take a political position of fear of functionally any strategic action, marks this as completely infantile. As I wrote in my notes for a particular quotation, goo goo gaga. Still, in a more direct, and you can go and find that in the description below, you'll find a link to this Google document. It's straight out written there. It was my only response to that entire paragraph. So in more direct context, what they're specifically aiming to do is say that under no terms will the party suspend its classist struggle until communism is obtained, regardless of conditions or ability to actually undertake revolutionary struggle, and it will not make alliances with any bourgeois strata or parties to do any intermediate forms of struggle. Okay. So long as we're serious here about what's necessary, and we're not going in and saying, oh no, we're not doing any sort of stuff that would actually put us on better terrain and move us forward. We are only aiming for the final goal with nothing in between. It's absurd for them to position themselves and express things in these terms. And maybe they don't mean to, but it certainly is written in that form. One core tactic of Leninism is to take advantage of the inevitable imperialist wars of capitalism and the stage of capitalism that is imperialism by harnessing, intensifying class struggle. Any alliance with movement to stop war is a naive and opportunist idea of the quote-unquote sanctity of peace and defense within capitalism where none exists. All energies and activities of the party need to focus on intensifying the struggle against capitalism and thereby imperialism. It must be known that the lesser evil in a war wherein it is not completely clearly historically progressive for one side or another to win is always going to be for your own nation to lose, as you are struggling in your own nation to seize power, not the other nation. Therefore, the proletariat of all nations seek to mutually sabotage their own countries in the advent of war and intensify class struggle, all seeking to result in the loss of their own nation in the imperialist war. However, there are circumstances wherein one nation losing is better than another. As an example, America is currently the arch conserver of capitalism. This is their words, by the way. And thus the capstone aim currently of the party, which must focus on revolutionary defeatism in one country at a given time, its own country, rather than simultaneous revolutionary defeatism. All parties are to do this, but also soberly analyze what the ideal results of the war will be and what actions to take based on that. Despite this, at no point does the party support a quote-unquote lesser evil in an imperialist war. Meanwhile, amongst the proletariat, the party agitates against the war even while preparing to profit from it in terms of bringing the class struggle to the fore and increasing communist numbers quantitatively. In this agitation, it focuses on producing revolutionary defeatism and calling for revolution. It extends its reach into economic organizations to propagandize against the war and mobilize, and refrains from participating in anti-war movements with non-economic organizations. The strikes of economic organizations supported by the party should lead to the development of workers' councils, which may end up as the headquarters of the revolution. At the end of the day, all the disparate revolutionary movements need to be welded together to the general class movement and to the party. In addition, the party recognizes that, should any government attempt to institute a draft or conscription, that is fertile ground for a revolution. Thus, communists do not actively fight the draft, though they absolutely agitate against it amongst the proletariat, but instead eagerly await getting armed so that they can build revolutionary cells within the military and prepare for the coming civil war that they will agitate in the military for and build soldiers' councils in preparation for. It's actually a thing that happened in World War I, wherein communist dissenters were specifically brought into the draft. And that has obvious results of the communist sympathizers getting together with the communists and their sympathizers getting together and saying, hey, maybe we should just take these guns and turn them on our own commanders and then just go home with our guns in hand, of course. right? So in addition, the party calls for a people's proletarian militia with military technical preparation while also engaging in legal work and infiltration of the bourgeois army, not refusing military service for moralistic reasons. The party agitates for direct proletarian action against the war to produce consciousness and give basis in revolutionary fighting amongst the workers. And the more extended and combative the bourgeois state makes the fight, the better, as it sharpens anger and the need for discipline, centralization, and organization on behalf of revolutionary intent. Ideally, the army is as maximally infiltrated with communist propaganda amongst the soldiers as possible, with discipline within the army reduced as much as possible so as to engender a mutiny. In service of this, communists should enter into the military, or if members of the proletariat are already in it, they should be instructed to stay in it so the military is suffused with armed, trained, and revolutionary members of the proletariat who hate their government. Soldiers who remain in it will splinter the military units through abandoning the front when the revolution occurs within the imperialist nation. The party will support the soldiers' return, directing them to fight on the internal front. When the soldiers leave the front, they are not to throw down their weapons, but instead keep them and be ready for the revolutionary moment. The party seeks to construct communist cells and then units within the army, producing either a section of the army in support of the revolution, or at least neutrality upon a communist insurrection. Ideally, there will be much fraternization between soldiers of hostile armies. Communists organize these, going beyond the basic military strike. Unfortunately, I have found vanishing little on how to carry out the construction and organization of soldiers' councils. They're referenced multiple times, but I can't find anything actually discussing them more than like a paragraph saying that they exist in anything. If anybody has any additional information on those, please share it. This is something of actually significant interest to me because I think that it's probably quite important, given that we know historically at least the acceptance of the army for a revolution is effectively necessary in many ways. Anyway, that is the end of the party's theses and classical evaluations on imperialist wars. And in addition to that is also the end of the Foundations of Communist Organizing series. With that done, let's talk about what will be coming next. For starters, uploads will slow down significantly. A video a day was not particularly ambitious, given that I had all these prepared ahead of time, but at the same time, a bit of a drain, so to speak. And I think also it was difficult for people to keep up. Going forward, I will probably be aiming to upload either once each week, possibly every 2 weeks. We'll see. In addition, there will be 4 different kinds of videos I intend to create. We'll see if there's any additional beyond this, but I doubt it. The first type is a continuation of this format that we've seen in these 3 series. But in comparison, it will be outside the confines of talking about a text and what it said about a particular topic, namely the dictatorship of the proletariat, the communist mode of production, or the foundations of communist organizing. In this case, I have a number of miscellaneous theory pieces I've read over the years, and both long and short, that I have summarized for my own purposes. I intend to start preparing those for publication here. I probably won't clean them up a particular amount, so expect some bullet points and stuff like that, but in general, I'll be putting them out there. The second type will be just for fun kinds of videos, intending to explore and trying to concretize some aspect of communist society. For example, how video games of different types might look under a new mode of production with changes in the superstructure and the way that games are treated within that. Just something of interest to a lot of people that I've talked to. or what housing might look like in terms of social architecture and changes in social expectation and so on. I've got a very big thing that I'm very excited to share along those lines. Think about modularity for that if you are excited about design and the like, which I am. The third type will be concept overview videos. I wasn't actually intending to do these beforehand, but it's been made abundantly clear that this is necessary in order to get some grounding. We'll be looking over particular topics that have come up in these 3 series and using the research done in conjunction with my own analysis from outside of these 3 series. For example, I've done a lot of research into cybernetic organizing and things of that nature, systems theory, anthropology, etc., etc. All those different things that we talked about in the initial video in this list that we need to go over, or perhaps not go over, but be aware of when we're talking about communist organizing. There are a variety of different fields that have developed which can improve our understanding about how to socially organize. And I'll be trying to include these within the concept overviews. Consider this the construction of a glossary, an analysis to create an in-depth look into what the content of a particular term is. It may or may not be associated with the 3 series in particular, but it's definitely going to be associated with them in general, right? We'll be drawing from all 3, and we'll be drawing from different ones in order to try and put together a concrete total understanding of a particular topic. This will include, for example, among many, and when I say many, I mean hundreds, and I'll probably cleave that down quite a lot. The concept of nationalization and its role in communist development, what the military would become in the dictatorship of the proletariat series, and its development as the class struggle starts to peter off and we start moving into the Gemeinwesen, the commonality, also policing as well, labor vouchers, the list goes on, right? This will be the bulk of the videos, that's unquestionable, and they'll probably be somewhat similar to the video uploaded earlier in the series, Analysis of Organic Centralism as claimed by the ICP. The 4th and final type I intend to create will be capstone projects for the 3 series. The Communist Mode of Production according to Marx and Engels, The Dictatorship of the Proletariat according to Marx and Engels, and Foundations of Communist Organizing. These will probably be in PowerPoint format, at least the first 2. I'm undecided on the Foundations one given its sheer comparative length, and it might find itself confined to the concept overview collection. Do not expect these to come out anytime particularly soon. While I've made serious headway into the Dictatorship of the Proletariat capstone project, it's been a lot of work. So still look forward to them, but just don't expect them to come out anytime soon. Call it a month, probably 2+ for the Dictatorship of the Proletariat one. And I can't make any hard claims on the Communist Mode of Production one, and the Foundations one is, of course, undecided, as said. Expect these also to have more clickbaity titles and thumbnails to garner interests, so look forward to those as well. For all those who stuck with me throughout these 3 series, thank you so much. I hope that you learned a ton just as I did when preparing these, and I hope to see you in the future again. That said, Demon Sultan out. Join United Marxist Pact if you're interested, and bye.